The moment the doors to that quiet California nursery opened, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. It was just another spring morning at Ridgewood Hills Early Learning Academy, an elite, high-security preschool tucked behind palm trees and wrought iron gates, far away from the flashing cameras and media chaos. Parents sipped lattes and exchanged polite smiles. Teachers prepped crayons and worksheets. But within 20 minutes, the school would become the epicenter of a royal scandal so bizarre, so emotionally raw, that even seasoned palace insiders whispered in disbelief. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. They weren't prepared for what they saw. Not the teachers, not the parents, and certainly not the small group of PTA members who sat frozen as a real prince, lost control in the very heart of a children's classroom. His voice thundered through the hallway. His hands reached for her collar. And Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, the woman who had once stood beside him on the world's grandest stages, didn't speak a word. She didn't scream. She didn't even flinch. But it wasn't just the aggression that stunned the room. It was the man behind them. The man in dark jeans and an untucked navy shirt, standing half-hidden by a bookshelf in the corner. The man who had been there for months, blending into the background. Meghan's longtime bodyguard. And then he said it, loud enough for every stunned parent and teacher to hear. "I'm Archie's real father." That sentence, 5 chilling words, flipped everything upside down. It wasn't just a moment of chaos, it was the ignition of a wildfire. In the days that followed, a flood of rumors, testimonies, leaked footage, and anonymous tips poured in like a tidal wave. Was the bodyguard serious? Was it a joke? Was Prince Harry physically violent with Meghan in public? Had a scandal been silently brewing behind those perfectly filtered Instagram posts for months or years? And perhaps most terrifying of all, was Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor not the biological child of Prince Harry? If that's true, it's not just a domestic crisis. It's a royal disaster with legal, political, and historical implications. Because Archie isn't just any child, he's 7th in line to the British throne. His birth was announced with the grandeur of monarchy, his face paraded on magazine covers across the globe. His name was entered into public record. And now, a man with no royal blood has stood in a nursery in Montecito, claiming to be the child's real father, right in front of Harry and Meghan. This is the story the world didn't expect. A story that starts not in Buckingham Palace, not in a courtroom, not in a tabloid editorial office, but in a toddler's playroom filled with finger paint and picture books. At the center of the storm is the royal couple who once declared they wanted privacy, only to now be exposed in the most public and scandalous way. The incident at Ridgewood Hills didn't just raise questions about family dynamics, it cracked open years of speculation. Whispers that had lived on the edges of forums and fan theories were now colliding with hard evidence and eyewitness accounts. One parent described Harry's voice as shaking the walls. Another claimed the Duke turned ashen-faced the second the bodyguard made the paternity claim. Teachers, caught in the middle of the eruption, have reportedly submitted formal statements to the school board. And 2 of them have already been placed on administrative leave while the administration reviews internal protocols following the incident. But perhaps most jaw-dropping of all was the PTA emergency meeting held just 3 days later. That's when parents, some teary-eyed, others furious, stood up and recounted everything. They talked about Harry's behavior, Meghan's silence, the bodyguard stare, and most damning of all, multiple parents independently reported that Meghan didn't deny the claim. No denial. Not in front of the teachers. Not in front of the parents. Not even when asked directly. What happened in that PTA meeting has been kept confidential by the school. Officially, the school has released no statement. But one parent, who chose to remain anonymous, recorded portions of the meeting on their phone. That footage, partially leaked online and verified by audio forensic analysts, has now sent shockwaves through the media. In it, you can hear a parent say, in disbelief, "She didn't even say he was wrong. She didn't say anything at all." And that silence? That silence might be louder than anything else. The implications here are devastating. For Harry, for Meghan, for the child, and for the monarchy. If the bodyguard's claim is false, it's defamation at the highest level. If it's true, it's royal fraud and potentially international scandal. But there's more. Much more. Because this wasn't the first red flag. This wasn't the first time people whispered questions about Archie's real parentage. And this certainly wasn't the first time Harry and Meghan were spotted having what insiders call confrontational public moments. For years, palace sources have hinted at tension, fights behind closed doors, icy car rides, cryptic social media posts, sudden changes in their public appearances. But until now, there was no smoking gun. No eyewitness account that pierced through the glossy PR curtain. This incident changes everything. In the next hour, we're going to unpack this story from top to bottom. We'll take you inside that classroom with exclusive eyewitness accounts of what really happened. We'll investigate the background of the bodyguard who made the explosive claim, his strange employment history, deleted photos, and a trail of digital breadcrumbs that might expose more than we imagined. We'll trace back the timeline of Archie's birth, the secrecy surrounding it, and the mounting questions that have haunted royal watchers since 2019. We'll look at the legal consequences, the media firestorm, and the palace's behind-the-scenes panic. And finally, we'll ask the questions that no one else dares to ask. Who is Archie Harrison's real father? Did Meghan Markle hide the truth from Prince Harry? And what happens when a fairy tale marriage collapses under the weight of betrayal, power, and secrets? This is not a story of gossip. This is not a story of clickbait. This is a story of two people, their child, and a moment so raw and unexpected that it peeled back the curtain on their carefully curated image and revealed something deeply human, deeply painful, and possibly deeply deceptive. Because when a man looks into the eyes of the boy he calls son, and someone else calls that boy their child, what happens next may change everything. Stay with us. This is just the beginning. It started like any other morning, the kind of ordinary weekday you'd expect in the affluent Montecito suburb. The sun had just begun to peek through the wispy clouds that rolled off the Santa Ynez Mountains. It was calm, quiet. A group of SUVs coasted down the drive toward Ridgewood Hills Early Learning Academy, a school nestled between orange groves and a gated estate community. The kind of place where you don't hear children screaming, because every detail, from the architecture to the playground mulch, has been carefully curated to look and feel like peace. But what happened that day shattered that illusion. Inside Classroom 3B, tiny chairs were arranged in a semicircle for morning circle time. Teachers chatted softly, preparing name tags, laminated weather charts, and an art corner stocked with fresh paint. The staff had already received the morning update. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle would be dropping off their son today. It wasn't uncommon, but it wasn't every day either. Security protocols were reviewed, cameras repositioned, and Meghan's preferred entry point through the rear drive was cleared of media and onlookers. At approximately 8:12 a.m., the black Range Rover carrying Harry, Meghan, and Archie entered the south gate. What followed inside the school's beige, ivy-covered walls would leave permanent scars on every person in that building. According to statements gathered from multiple parents who were on site for the PDA breakfast event, Prince Harry appeared agitated from the moment he stepped out of the vehicle. A father who was present said the prince stormed inside with his jaw clenched, while Meghan followed behind him silently, clutching Archie's hand but avoiding eye contact with anyone. One teacher, who asked not to be named, later told authorities it was like they had already been fighting before they even got out of the car. Meghan looked like she wanted to be anywhere but there. The school was hosting a brief parents and teachers mixer that morning in the assembly room just adjacent to the classrooms. It was supposed to be informal coffee, pastries, introductions. But Meghan insisted on personally walking Archie to his classroom, which some found unusual. Typically, a nanny or bodyguard handled drop-offs when the Duke and Duchess were unavailable. A mother of a student in Archie's class recalled, "We all noticed Meghan looked off. Pale. Quiet. She kissed Archie on the cheek, knelt down to say something to him, then stood back like she was preparing for something. Something she didn't want to face." Prince Harry was still a few feet behind them, talking intensely with a member of their security team, later identified as the now infamous bodyguard, who would drop the biggest bombshell of the year. Then it happened. According to no fewer than 4 PTA members who submitted detailed testimonies, the incident began with a whispered argument between Harry and Meghan just outside Archie's classroom door. Their voices were initially low, but tensions visibly escalated. Witnesses say Harry's posture changed. He began pacing, raising his hands in frustration. Meghan, meanwhile, looked downward and refused to respond to his accusations, whatever they were. She just stood there, one witness said, like she was frozen. He kept asking her the same question again and again, like he couldn't believe what she'd told him or what someone else had told him. The moment came fast. Teachers and parents alike say Prince Harry reached out and grabbed the collar of Meghan's beige sweater with one hand. Gently at first, some claimed, but then with enough force that it pulled her slightly backward. A few gasps broke the silence of the hallway. It was in that charged, stunned moment that the bodyguard, who had entered the hallway unnoticed, spoke. "I'm Archie's real father." The words didn't echo like some Hollywood script. They landed cold and flat, like a punch to the chest. The man didn't shout. He said it calmly, almost too calmly, as if stating a fact everyone else should have already known. Every teacher, parent, and administrator froze. A teacher who witnessed it from the end of the hall told a local news outlet that she dropped her clipboard out of sheer shock. Megan turned her head toward the man, her eyes wide, her face emotionless. Harry's hand slipped from her collar. The hallway was silent for 3 full seconds, until a child's voice called out from the classroom for "Mummy." That snapped Megan back to the present. She brushed past both men, walked into the classroom, and helped Archie settle into his seat. Not a word, not a glance back. Not even as the entire hallway erupted into murmurs, confusion, and barely contained panic. Staff immediately separated the students from the scene. Some parents ushered their children back to the common area. A senior administrator escorted Prince Harry and Meghan to the principal's office while the bodyguard was quietly led away by a second security team. No formal police report was filed that morning, but school officials later confirmed in an internal memo that an incident of a sensitive domestic nature had occurred and that the school would be reviewing safety protocols regarding all visiting adults. But what wasn't included in that memo, what couldn't be swept under the rug, was the aftermath. 3 teachers submitted written accounts to the board that day. 7 parents met privately that evening to coordinate their statements. And within 48 hours, an emergency PTA meeting was scheduled to address what many described as potential psychological trauma and the unacceptable public behavior of a high-profile family on school grounds. The parents were angry. One father, whose child is friends with Archie, said during the PTA session, "We are being told to stay silent because of who they are. But our kids deserve safety. This isn't just drama. This is chaos, and it's happening around our children." One mother shared a deeply unsettling perspective. "What scared me most wasn't the yelling. It was that Megan didn't say anything to correct the bodyguard. She didn't look shocked. She didn't even look confused. She just accepted it, like it wasn't news to her at all." Others echoed this same concern. Megan had not denied the claim. Not in front of teachers. Not in the principal's office. Not even during the PTA meeting when asked directly by a concerned parent if the accusation was false. By then, the media had already begun circling. Whispers of a nursery blowout involving Prince Harry and an alleged paternity claim had leaked to several British and American tabloids, though no names were officially named at first. But then, just days later, a blurry photo surfaced online. It was snapped by a nanny employed by another family who happened to be in the hallway that morning. The photo showed Harry gripping Meghan's sleeve, his face contorted with visible rage. Standing several feet behind them was the man in question, Meghan's bodyguard. That image alone didn't prove anything, but paired with the testimonies and recordings leaked from the PTA session, it became clear something real had happened. Something explosive. Something that couldn't be dismissed as a mere marital squabble. The school tried to contain the story. Letters were sent out urging families to respect the privacy of all students and refrain from speaking to the press. But the genie was already out of the bottle. And within days, this quiet preschool had become a battlefield for truth, secrets, and possibly royal deception. Multiple parents have since withdrawn their children from Ridgewood Hills, citing safety concerns. The headmistress has temporarily stepped down. And the bodyguard? He's gone. Disappeared from the property. His social media deleted. His LinkedIn scrubbed. No public statement has been made. Not from him. Not from Meghan. Not from Harry. But the questions are only getting louder. And the silence? It's deafening. His face was familiar to a few, but most parents at Ridgewood Hills hadn't given him a second thought. He was just another suited man in sunglasses standing near the SUV or by the school's rear gate. Silent. Watchful. Always close to Meghan Markle, but never speaking unless spoken to. In Montecito, where high-profile families regularly move with private security details, his presence barely registered until the moment his voice shattered the room. "I'm Archie's real father." Those words, now engraved in the minds of everyone who was present that day, launched a frenzied search to uncover the man behind the claim. Who was he? How long had he worked for the Sussexes? Was there any truth to what he said, or was it the outburst of a disgruntled employee? The man's name, withheld by the media for several days under legal pressure, eventually leaked through alternative news sites and whistleblowers from within the school. His name is Joshua Maddox, a former United States Marine turned private security specialist, aged 39. For over 2 years, he worked closely with Meghan Markle in a personal protection capacity. Unlike most high-profile bodyguards, Joshua kept an extremely low profile. There were no red carpet appearances, no tagged Instagram photos with celebrities, no LinkedIn endorsements. He seemed to exist only in the background until now. According to 3 separate sources who previously worked on Meghan's team, Joshua Maddox was brought on after the birth of Archie in 2019 but was not part of the initial UK-based security team. Instead, he was hired shortly after the families moved to Canada during their brief stay on Vancouver Island and was later retained for their transition into Montecito, California. A former staffer from the Vancouver estate, who spoke anonymously due to a non-disclosure agreement, recalled seeing Joshua during late-night hours, walking the perimeter or speaking privately with Meghan on the back patio. He wasn't like the other guards, the source said. There was a familiarity there. She trusted him. He was always near. That familiarity grew more obvious in Montecito. Eyewitnesses reported that Joshua was frequently seen accompanying Meghan on solo outings, yoga classes, boutique shopping trips, even doctor visits. It was rare to see him shadowing Prince Harry. In fact, some local residents commented that Harry appeared increasingly distant from the bodyguard, as if something unspoken hung between them. Joshua never looked at Harry, one neighbor claimed. There was no eye contact, no conversation, like they were 2 people forced to occupy the same space but living in completely different realities. Over the course of 2020 and 2021, rumors began to brew quietly among members of Meghan and Harry's own inner circle. A stylist who worked with Meghan on a private shoot said she once heard Joshua referred to by Meghan as Jay, in a tone far more affectionate than professional. It wasn't flirtatious, the stylist recalled. It was deeper than that. There was a gentleness in how she spoke to him, something you don't normally see with hired security. But those rumors remained just that quiet speculation with no hard proof, until the explosive confrontation at Ridgewood Hills Nursery. The moment Joshua Maddox spoke those fateful words, he didn't look panicked or impulsive. He stood tall, calm, resolved. It was not the behavior of a man trying to provoke chaos. It was the behavior of someone who had reached the edge of secrecy and could no longer stay silent. When questioned by school administrators after the incident, Joshua reportedly stated that he had nothing further to say at this time and requested to leave immediately. He complied peacefully, was escorted to the school parking lot, and drove away in a separate vehicle, not the one assigned to Harry and Meghan. By that evening, his phone had been disconnected. His known social media profiles were scrubbed, and his name had vanished from every background check database typically accessible for contractors and private employees. The disappearance only fueled speculation. Was he silenced? Threatened? Paid off? A former associate of Maddox, who once trained with him in a private security course in Nevada, described him as disciplined, quiet, and not the type to make wild accusations. This same associate confirmed that Maddox had previously turned down several lucrative jobs in high-risk regions to remain close to a personal client in California, though he never named Meghan. One of the more bizarre discoveries in the aftermath of the Nursery incident was the surfacing of an old photograph taken in Los Angeles in early 2019, weeks before Archie's official birth date. In the background of the photo, Meghan is seen walking out of a private wellness clinic. Joshua Maddox is seen beside her, not in uniform, but in casual wear, jeans and a white baseball cap, his hand gently resting on the small of her back. It's a fleeting image, blurry, but damning to those who believe something more intimate was unfolding beneath the surface. Another layer of mystery was added when a document began circulating online, allegedly from a hospital in California where Meghan was believed to have received prenatal care. The document, which has not been officially verified, lists Joshua Maddox as an emergency contact. The date? Just weeks before Archie's birth. If true, this would not only validate Maddox's closeness to Meghan during her pregnancy, it would raise serious questions about why Harry himself was not listed or why another member of the royal staff wasn't assigned that role. But perhaps most chilling was a voicemail leaked to a celebrity gossip journalist from an unnamed source who claims to have worked briefly on Meghan's California security detail in 2021. In the recording, a man believed to be Maddox is heard saying, "I protected them. I stayed silent. But how long can you lie to a child about where they came from?" The voice is low, steady, almost mournful. Critics argue that Maddox may be exploiting the situation for fame or revenge. But there's no book deal, no press tour, no Instagram tell-all. He's disappeared from public view completely, something that doesn't track with the behavior of an opportunist. So why now? Why make the claim in a public school hallway? Why risk everything? According to a well-connected insider who claims to have knowledge of internal Sussex family dynamics, Maddox had recently been demoted from primary security duties and reassigned after a growing rift between him and Prince Harry. The final straw? A series of private arguments between Harry and Meghan over Archie's resemblance, or lack thereof, to the prince. There was doubt, the insider revealed. There had been for some time. It started small, comments from friends, comparisons to baby photos. But Harry began asking questions. The kind you only ask when the math doesn't add up. If Joshua Maddox was indeed in an intimate relationship with Meghan prior to or during her pregnancy, the implications are staggering. Not just for the couple, but for the monarchy, for the press, for the very narrative that Meghan and Harry have spent years carefully constructing. As of this writing, neither the Duke nor Duchess of Sussex have publicly commented on Maddox's claim. Palace representatives in London have declined to speak on the matter, citing the Sussexes' departure from official royal duties. But behind the silence is a ticking bomb. Maddox's history, his closeness to Meghan, and the haunting possibility that Archie's true paternity has been hidden for years, all of it threatens to unravel the already fragile thread holding the Sussex family's public image together. Joshua Maddox is no longer just a bodyguard. He's now the center of a global mystery. A man whose 5 words may destroy everything the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have tried to protect. In the weeks leading up to the now infamous Nursery incident, subtle but strange shifts in Meghan Markle's behavior were quietly noticed by those around her. Staff, neighbors, teachers, and even family acquaintances observed what they described as an emotional disconnection, a kind of tension that seemed to weigh on her like a physical burden. From carefully curated public appearances to unscripted private moments, Meghan's demeanor was changing, and not for the better. To the public, she still smiled when the cameras were on. But behind closed doors, in the homes and halls of Montecito, a different version of Meghan began to emerge. One more withdrawn, visibly distracted, and some say detached from Prince Harry. Several of her closest acquaintances confided in journalists under anonymity that Meghan had started canceling social commitments. Charity board appearances were missed or rescheduled. Even her once daily routine of yoga and coastal walks seemed to fade into the background. A longtime friend who had attended a lunch with Meghan just 2 weeks prior to the altercation at Ridgewood Hills described her as fragile and haunted. She barely touched her food, the friend recalled. Her phone buzzed constantly, but she ignored it. I asked if everything was okay, and she just smiled and said, "I'm learning to breathe through things now." I didn't press her, but I knew something was wrong. She wasn't the Meghan I knew a year ago. This emotional unraveling didn't go unnoticed by the school either. Teachers at Ridgewood Hills said Meghan had grown less involved in school-related events. While Harry occasionally appeared animated and eager during virtual parent-teacher meetings, Meghan was quiet, nodding but rarely contributing, offering quick thank yous but never diving deep into questions. The head of student affairs privately noted that Meghan appeared preoccupied during her last school tour, often glancing at her phone or watching the hallway behind her. One teacher, in a private statement, wrote, "She always looked over her shoulder, like she was waiting for someone to arrive, or someone to catch her doing something." Days before the incident, Meghan reportedly stopped by the school unannounced to drop off a book for Archie. The staff said she seemed nervous. When asked casually about Harry, she simply said, "He's working things out," then changed the subject. On the morning of the incident itself, those feelings of unease seemed to climax. Surveillance footage reviewed internally by school administrators, but not yet released to the public, allegedly shows Meghan arriving at the school gates with a visibly stiff posture, her expression unreadable. Staff recall her barely speaking during sign-in. Her voice, when heard, was low and hushed, lacking her usual charisma. But it was her silence during and after the confrontation that left the deepest impression on those present. Multiple parents and teachers later testified that Meghan never reacted with shock or denial when the bodyguard, Joshua Maddox, made the now infamous paternity claim. In fact, one mother seated just feet away from Meghan said she looked more embarrassed than surprised. She didn't gasp. She didn't shout or push back. She just looked down like she was trying not to cry or trying to hide that she already knew. It wasn't just what Meghan didn't say, it was how her body betrayed her. Several attendees of the PTA meeting noted that Meghan was visibly trembling when she returned to the classroom. Her hands clutched her phone tightly. Her hair, usually styled perfectly, hung loosely as if she'd forgotten to finish it. One father reported that Meghan seemed to float out of the room, walking as though detached from her own body. Following the incident, Meghan vanished from public view for nearly 10 days. This was highly uncharacteristic for someone who once spoke out regularly on podcasts, Zoom panels, and women's empowerment events. Paparazzi who normally staked out her Montecito property noticed that no cars came or left for a week. Local delivery services reported canceled appointments. Even neighbors remarked on the sudden quiet. It was like the house shut down, one resident of their gated community revealed. No lights, no music, no staff movement. We thought maybe they left town, but security said otherwise. Theories began swirling online. Was Meghan in hiding? Was there a mental health crisis behind the scenes? Was she negotiating a legal defense? Or worse, had she been forcibly silenced? Some pointed to the chilling silence as a sign of guilt. Others interpreted it as a calculated pause to allow legal teams to do damage control. But among those closest to the couple, the whispers were different. They said Meghan was devastated. An anonymous source close to Meghan's inner circle told an investigative outlet that Meghan had privately broken down in tears after the incident. She was sobbing, asking, "How could this happen? How did it come to this?" There was no playbook for this. No strategy. She was afraid of what Harry might do next, not just in public, but at home. Reports later surfaced that Meghan had briefly moved out of the Montecito estate following the nursery scene. She allegedly stayed at a private residence in Beverly Hills owned by a longtime friend. Though this could not be independently verified, satellite images showed a sudden increase in security presence at that address the very week she disappeared from public view. Meanwhile, Harry was seen alone at several locations in Santa Barbara, including a hiking trail he usually frequented with Meghan. Onlookers described him as tense, pacing, checking his phone. When approached by a concerned passerby, he reportedly responded, "Some things just don't make sense anymore." But for Meghan, the psychological toll appeared heavier. According to a family therapist consulted for insight on her body language, Meghan exhibited classic signs of internal collapse. When a person doesn't respond to conflict with defense or aggression, but rather with detachment and quiet submission, it suggests they've already been broken emotionally, the therapist explained. She may have felt she had no power left, no voice. Or perhaps, deep down, she believed she didn't deserve to argue back. That idea, that Meghan may have already accepted the collapse of her carefully built world, is echoed by former employees of the Sussex team. One aide recalled Meghan canceling a scheduled podcast recording just days before the scandal broke, saying she was too emotionally drained to be inspiring today. Even Archie's daily routine reportedly changed. His usual playgroup visits stopped. His school attendance became inconsistent. A teacher revealed that the once charming little boy seemed confused and quieter than usual in the week following the incident. One child even asked their mother, "Why is Archie sad all the time now?" By the time Meghan resurfaced in public, wearing oversized sunglasses, no makeup, and a hoodie pulled over her head, she looked like someone who had walked through a storm and hadn't found the sun on the other side. Gone was the glossy Duchess persona. In her place stood a woman consumed by something far bigger than scandal, possibly truth. Whether Meghan had known about the bodyguard's intentions remains a mystery. Whether she ever confided in Harry about any doubts or secrets regarding Archie's parentage is also unknown. But what's clear, through every testimony and recorded detail, is that Meghan was not shocked when it happened. She was broken, not by the claim, but by the public exposure of it. And that, more than anything, has made many believe that this story has been quietly unfolding for a very long time. For a man born into the highest echelons of royalty, Prince Harry's transformation over the last decade has been nothing short of seismic. From the once smiling, charismatic soldier prince beloved across the Commonwealth, to a visibly strained husband and father now shrouded in scandal, the cracks in Harry's public image haven't just deepened, they've become canyons. What happened in the hallway at Ridgewood Hills Nursery may have shocked the public, but for those close to the couple, the outburst was merely the culmination of a slow, painful unraveling. Prince Harry hadn't been himself in months. Some say years. Friends had warned of his emotional instability, his growing irritability, his tendency to lash out during moments of perceived betrayal or insecurity. But no one expected it to go this far. An alleged moment of physical aggression toward Meghan, and a paternity bombshell delivered by a man Harry had likely harbored suspicions about for years. To understand that moment, we need to rewind back through a series of small collapses. Because long before the bodyguard made his claim, before Meghan's silence, before the world speculated about Archie's true father, Harry had already begun to fall apart. It began subtly after their move to Montecito in 2020. According to insiders, the transition from royal life to private citizenry wasn't as smooth as their team made it seem. Harry missed structure. He missed purpose. And, reportedly, he missed family, despite his public statements to the contrary. He would talk about the palace like it was a prison, one close friend said. But once he left it, he realized how loud the world really was. How unprotected. In the palace, you're controlled, but you're also safe. Outside, everything was unpredictable. Harry's early days in California were full of projects. The Oprah interview, the Netflix deal, the podcast, the memoir. He was everywhere, yet never fully present. As one producer involved with their streaming series later admitted, he looked tired. Not physically, but in his eyes. You could tell something wasn't sitting right inside him. Then came the pressures of parenting, out of the public eye, but still under intense scrutiny. Harry, who had lost his own mother at a young age, reportedly struggled with intense paranoia about Archie's safety. Staff members at their Montecito estate told journalists he would walk the property late into the night, flashlight in hand, checking gates and doors himself, sometimes 3 or 4 times before sleeping. He had a kind of nervous energy, a former employee said. Like he couldn't switch off. Like he was always waiting for someone to come take something from him. At first, Meghan tried to ease those fears. But over time, according to insiders, she grew exhausted. Their dynamic shifted. Harry became more dependent, Meghan more withdrawn. Disagreements over parenting styles allegedly grew more frequent. And behind those disagreements, a deeper issue began to rise to the surface: Harry's growing doubts. According to a source who has remained in touch with one of Harry's former therapists, the prince had quietly begun to question the timeline of Meghan's pregnancy in private. The photos, the medical appointments, the details of labor, all of it, at some point, began to blur in Harry's memory. And when Archie was born, the joy was real, but so was something else. Something quieter. A sense of distance. Harry couldn't explain it, the therapist reportedly told a colleague. He loved his son, but something felt off. Something he couldn't shake. That feeling intensified in early 2022 when a private DNA kit was allegedly discovered in Harry's home office drawer. A staff member who found the unopened box later said nothing about it at the time, but never forgot it. When asked why Harry would order such a kit, the staffer replied, "Why does anyone order one? Because they need to know." If true, this could suggest that Harry had been harboring doubts about Archie's paternity long before the bodyguard's claim at Ridgewood Hills. It might also explain the emotional volatility that followed. By mid-2023, Harry's public appearances had grown more erratic. At an Invictus Games press event, he appeared flustered, fumbled his notes, and abruptly left the stage halfway through his speech. Days later, he was seen arguing with a photographer outside of a charity gala. When asked if he was all right, he snapped, "Would you be?" His friends noticed the shift. He stopped returning calls. He declined a planned ski trip with 2 of his oldest army mates. One of them told a UK tabloid he was disappearing. Not physically, but emotionally. It's like we didn't know how to reach him anymore. There were even reports that Harry had attempted to reach out to his brother, Prince William, in a rare moment of vulnerability. A mutual friend claimed Harry left a voice message saying, "I don't know who I am anymore. Will. I don't know who I am." William reportedly never responded. Back at home, Meghan and Harry were increasingly described as cohabiting strangers. Separate bedrooms, separate routines, separate lives. And yet, they still showed up together for public engagements. Smiling, waving, performing. But the mask cracked during a quiet parent conference at Ridgewood Hills, weeks before the blowout. According to a teacher who attended the meeting, Harry had been unusually dismissive, cutting Meghan off mid-sentence when she tried to explain something about Archie's curriculum. He snapped at her, the teacher recalled. Not loudly, but it was sharp. You could feel the room change. She looked down, and he just kept talking like nothing happened. Those cracks widened fast. At a private dinner held by a local philanthropic group in Santa Barbara, Harry allegedly drank more than usual and began venting to his small group about feeling trapped by secrets. A source who attended the dinner said he seemed on the verge of collapse and had to be escorted out by one of their aides. When asked to clarify what kind of secrets he meant, Harry reportedly said, "The ones that tear a family apart." The final straw came days before the nursery incident. One source close to the couple claimed Harry received a direct message from an anonymous social media account containing a photograph of Meghan and Joshua Maddox, taken months before Archie's birth. It showed them on a hiking trail, laughing. Her hand was on his chest. The message read, "Ask her the truth before it destroys you." What followed, according to the source, was a 48-hour period of tension so thick, even their security team was placed on high alert. Harry reportedly confronted Meghan. She denied nothing, but refused to elaborate. That silence, that refusal, broke something inside him. And so, on that fateful morning at Ridgewood Hills, when Joshua Maddox made his claim, Harry's world cracked wide open. Witnesses say the prince's reaction was both instant and implosive. He didn't look shocked. He looked shattered. His hand, which had gripped Meghan's collar just moments before, dropped to his side. He turned, briefly locked eyes with the bodyguard, then looked back at Meghan, not with anger, but with something much more painful: betrayal. In the hours that followed, Harry refused to speak with school officials. He refused a ride home from his staff. Instead, he walked, alone, for over an hour, through Montecito's winding streets, his head down, his phone untouched. He returned home that evening, packed a small bag, and checked into a luxury suite in a Santa Barbara hotel, according to a hotel employee who recognized him. For 3 days, he didn't leave the room. Room service staff said the only thing he ordered was whiskey and plain toast. As the media storm picked up and the internet exploded with theories, Harry remained silent. No statements. No denials. Only a leak from someone close to the couple confirmed what many had feared, that Harry had finally voiced the words he'd held back for years. "I don't think he's mine," he allegedly said, holding a photograph of Archie. The fallout is still ongoing. But one thing is certain: the prince the world once knew, the soldier, the brother, the father, the husband, has been broken. And in his silence, we are left to wonder, when the truth finally arrives, will he have anything left of his old life to return to? When the doors to the Ridgewood Hills PTA meeting closed on that gray Thursday evening, the air inside the assembly room was different, charged, heavy, strained. It was not the usual gathering of smiling parents, exchanging holiday recipes or classroom volunteer sign-up sheets. There were no cheerful bulletins on the walls this time, no trays of cookies, no laughter echoing from nearby classrooms. Only silence, anxious whispers, and the shuffling of papers as people took their seats with solemn expressions. Something unspoken hung in the air, something that needed to be voiced, but that no one quite knew how to begin. Because this wasn't a regular PTA meeting. This was an emergency session, summoned just 3 days after the explosive confrontation involving Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and their bodyguard inside the school. And while the administration called it a confidential debrief regarding behavioral safety protocols, every parent in the room knew what it was really about. They had all seen it, or heard it, or had it described to them in agonizing detail by their children, who were still trying to make sense of what they'd witnessed. At the front of the room, seated behind a makeshift table, were the school's principal, 2 board members, and the head of student mental wellness. None of them looked comfortable. They were about to open a floodgate. They just didn't know how high the water would rise. The principal began with a scripted apology for the emotional disturbance that had taken place in the school hallway. She assured everyone that the incident was being reviewed, that security protocols were being updated, and that the school was committed to protecting the emotional and physical well-being of every student. But then she paused, and the room held its breath, because that wasn't what the parents had come for. One father, whose daughter was in the same classroom as Archie, raised his hand. The principal nodded. He stood up, slowly. "With all due respect," he said, his voice calm but deliberate, "we didn't come here to hear about future policy. We came here to talk about what happened, about what we all saw, what our kids saw." The principal tried to redirect, but the room murmured in agreement. The father continued, "I saw Prince Harry grab Meghan by the collar. I saw her go still. And I heard that man, her bodyguard, say he was Archie's real father, loud enough for everyone to hear. And what I didn't see was any denial." The tension exploded. Hands flew up. Voices echoed through the room. The floodgate was open. A mother of twins seated near the back stood up, shaking. My boys came home crying. Crying. One of them said he was scared Archie's daddy was going to hit his mommy. The other asked me if bodyguards were allowed to steal kids. How do I explain this? The principal tried again to interject, to redirect the discussion, but the parents weren't having it. Not this time. A third parent, a local pediatrician, raised a trembling hand and added, "What scared me wasn't just the yelling. It was that Megan didn't look surprised. She looked like she already knew." That statement hit the room like a brick. Another mother, who had been standing near the door of the classroom that day, nodded in agreement. She didn't even say no. That's what I keep playing in my head. She didn't deny it. Not once. Not even after the man said what he said. She just looked down and walked away. By then, the head of student wellness had her pinned down, her expression grim. She was no longer writing notes. She was just listening, wide-eyed, like the rest of the room. A teacher who had been quietly seated at the side finally spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I probably shouldn't say this," she said, glancing nervously at the administrators, but the children noticed. Even before this happened, they'd ask why Archie's daddy didn't pick him up as much, why his mummy always looked sad, why he looked more like someone else. There was a long silence. Then another teacher spoke up. "We've had whispers about this for months. Nothing concrete, but there were inconsistencies. Last fall, we had a school photo day. Archie was absent, but then a photo was submitted for the yearbook. A photo that wasn't taken by us. It looked odd, slightly edited. And when we asked for the original, we were told it wasn't available." Someone in the room gasped audibly. A board member tried to bring the discussion back to student wellness, but was quickly interrupted by a parent who had been silent until then, a man with salt and pepper hair and a crisp navy sweater, seated near the front. "I served in the military," he said flatly. "I've seen trauma. And I saw a man at the edge of himself that day. That was not a normal argument. That was a breakdown. A man realizing something in real time. And it was terrifying." The room fell silent again. Then, one parent, an older woman who introduced herself as a retired child psychologist, said something that reframed the entire conversation. "We are so focused on the scandal," she said, "but there's a child in the middle of this. A very young child who may be caught between stories that don't match, between adults who are unraveling. What are we doing to protect him? What happens if this explodes further?" That question landed hard. The principal leaned forward again. This time her voice was less guarded. "We are actively working with our child protection team and our legal advisors. We're reviewing every policy on adult access to school grounds. And we are coordinating with mental health professionals to ensure Archie, and every child affected by what they saw, has support. But what I can't do is silence what you saw. What I can't deny is that something serious happened here." Then, almost as if on cue, a parent near the exit quietly walked up to the table and slid a phone across it. "I recorded part of the conversation in the hallway," she said. "I know we're not supposed to, but I couldn't just forget what I heard." The principal looked stunned. "We will need to submit this for legal review," she said, visibly shaken. "But thank you." That recording, though not officially released, was later leaked to a local news outlet. Audio experts confirmed its authenticity. In it, the bodyguard's voice is clear, direct, and without hesitation. "I'm Archie's real father." And in the background, there's a gasp. Then Harry's voice, strained, cracking. "What did you just say to me?" Then silence. Megan's silence. Not a word. Not a sound. The PTA meeting ended with no resolution. Only more questions. Parents left in stunned silence, some clutching their children tighter than usual. Teachers walked out quietly, many headed straight for the counselor's office. The board promised a full investigation, but few believed that would come quickly or truthfully. One parent summarized the feeling best as she walked out, her voice soft but clear. "This wasn't just a family argument. This was a revelation. And the way it was handled tells me, this isn't the end. It's just the beginning." In the wake of the nursery incident and the devastating PTA testimonies, the spotlight began to shift. Not just on Meghan, not just on Prince Harry, but on the men who had quietly stood behind them. Men whose job it was to remain silent, to protect, to disappear into the background. But some of them had stories. Stories they had never shared. Until now. For years, Meghan Markle has been surrounded by a rotating cast of bodyguards and private security personnel. It comes with the territory, being a public figure, a duchess, and one half of the most controversial couple of the modern royal era. But within that rotation were a few faces who stayed longer than others. Men who didn't just open doors and scan rooftops. Men who were present during tense moments, during transitions, during pregnancy, during private family time. After Joshua Maddox's stunning claim inside Ridgewood Hills, former bodyguards who had once worked for MEGHAN, some during her time in the UK, others during her North American relocation, began to break their silence. Quietly, carefully, but undeniably. One of the first to come forward was a man we'll call Darren, a former British intelligence operative turned private contractor. He was assigned to MEGHAN's security detail shortly after her engagement to Harry, and remained part of her team through the early months of her pregnancy with Archie. Darren never gave a televised interview, but in a confidential deposition, later leaked by a whistleblower in the industry, his words painted a disturbing picture. I was asked to follow her, but never be visible. That was the instruction. She preferred to be alone, or with one person in particular. A tall man, American accent. Not on our payroll. According to Darren, this mystery man appeared frequently during MEGHAN's solo excursions. He was never introduced. He was never vetted. But he was always there. I saw them in parks, in cafes. Once, outside a clinic. He was never far. That description matches everything known so far about Joshua Maddox. A second bodyguard, this one employed during MEGHAN and Harry's brief stay in Vancouver Island, described a similar situation. Speaking under the condition of anonymity, he revealed how MEGHAN had her own arrangements. She didn't trust the royal staff. She had her own phone, her own cars, and her own people. This was around the same period Maddox was allegedly first employed as part of MEGHAN's personal security detail. What struck many as odd was how protective MEGHAN was of her inner circle, especially of Joshua. According to the Vancouver Guard, MEGHAN often bypassed official security protocols to allow Maddox entry through back gates and service doors. He was not on the official security list, but he was always granted access. It became an issue, the former guard said. There was a moment when Harry asked why Joshua was around so much. MEGHAN said it was for emotional support. That raised some red flags, especially when Harry started showing signs of discomfort. These signs of discomfort weren't just minor disputes. According to a female member of the security team who left shortly after the couple's move to California, there were full-blown arguments. I heard them, she said. Harry and MEGHAN, yelling in the garden late at night. One time, I heard him say, "I'm not stupid. You think I haven't noticed?" What he was referring to, she couldn't confirm. But the timing lined up with increasing rumors of MEGHAN's emotional dependency on Maddox and the blurred lines between professional and personal boundaries. Then there's the curious case of Tom Wilkins, a former driver for the Sussex team during their early months in Los Angeles. Wilkins, now working in private transport, agreed to speak to journalists after he was released from his non-disclosure agreement when his contract was not renewed. I drove them a lot. Not together, though. Mostly MEGHAN and Archie. Sometimes MEGHAN and the bodyguard. Harry was rarely around. Wilkins recalled one particular drive from a private residence in the Hollywood Hills to a secluded wellness retreat in Ojai. MEGHAN and Joshua Maddox sat in the back. Wilkins claims they spoke in hushed tones, and MEGHAN repeatedly referred to Joshua as Jay. At one point, she showed him something on her phone. They laughed. Joshua put his hand on her knee. It wasn't flirtation, Wilkins said. It was intimacy. Like they'd known each other forever. But perhaps the most jarring testimony came from a now-retired staffer who had been part of MEGHAN's advanced security team for a high-profile event in Toronto. This was before her relationship with Harry had gone public. According to this source, MEGHAN arrived late to a meeting with an American man she called her friend from the Marines. He introduced himself only as Josh. He was tall, calm, very protective, the source recalled. I assumed they were dating. That's how they acted. That's how he looked at her. Again, the description matches Joshua Maddox. With these testimonies stacking up, patterns began to emerge. MEGHAN had kept Maddox close, possibly long before her marriage to Harry. She had ensured he was always within reach, even when others questioned his presence. She shielded him from scrutiny, refused to answer questions about his role, and allegedly clashed with Harry over his proximity. More troubling still are the growing number of digital breadcrumbs tying Maddox to Archie's birth. An IT security specialist working with a UK media group claims to have retrieved metadata from a deleted photo posted briefly to a private account believed to belong to a member of MEGHAN's personal team. The photo, which was only online for less than 30 minutes in 2020, showed a man holding a newborn, wrapped in a blue blanket. The GPS tag placed the image at a secluded birthing center in Los Angeles. The man in the photo? A near-identical match to Joshua Maddox. What's more, internal documents allegedly obtained from that same center show a registered emergency contact with the initials JM matching Joshua's full name. Whether these clues are enough to form a conclusive timeline is uncertain. But to the former bodyguards now speaking out, the pieces don't look like coincidence. "There's a reason Meghan never fired him," said one. "There's a reason he lasted longer than any other private contractor on her team. And there's a reason she didn't react when he claimed paternity. Because deep down, she knew this moment would come." Still, not all insiders believe Maddox is telling the full truth. A former British royal staff member, who worked closely with the Sussexes before they stepped down from royal duties, argued that Maddox may be operating from emotional pain rather than fact. It's possible he believes he's the father, but that doesn't make it true. There could be more manipulation going on than any of us realize. Even so, the former guards who've now come forward say the same thing. Meghan and Maddox were close. Too close. And Harry noticed. With every testimony, the mystery only deepens. Who is Joshua Maddox really? Why was he embedded so deeply into Meghan's personal life before and after Archie's birth? And if these former bodyguards are to be believed, what does it say about the structure of a royal marriage built on secrets, blurred lines, and men standing silently in the background, watching everything unfold? From the very beginning, Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor's life has been steeped in mystery. Born into one of the world's most recognizable families, his public appearances have been few and far between, marked by careful staging, strict access control, and a haunting absence of spontaneity. For a child seventh in line to the British throne, the lack of transparency surrounding his birth, development, and public image has fueled years of speculation. But in light of recent events, particularly the explosive paternity claim from Meghan's bodyguard, many are now revisiting the timeline of Archie's public life and noticing that the pieces never fully aligned. The first unusual moment came before Archie was even born. Meghan's pregnancy announcement in October 2018 was met with excitement, but also quiet confusion among royal watchers. She and Harry had just arrived in Australia for a royal tour, and palace staffers appeared caught off guard. The timing was odd. Her schedule was not altered. She performed strenuous duties throughout the tour with no indication of pregnancy fatigue. Observers noted that Meghan's figure remained unchanged well into her second trimester, and the announcement itself lacked the formality typically associated with royal births. Then came the birth announcement in May 2019. Kensington Palace released a brief statement, but what followed next was unprecedented. Unlike past royal births, there was no hospital photo on the steps of the Lindo wing. No doctors were identified. No official medical team made statements. In fact, for several days after the birth, the public didn't even know where Archie had been delivered. It was later revealed he was allegedly born at Portland Hospital in London, but no images, videos, or clear documentation were ever provided. Reporters were barred from access, and medical staff were reportedly made to sign airtight non-disclosure agreements. When the couple finally introduced Archie to the world, it was through a heavily choreographed photo op inside Windsor Castle. Baby Archie, wrapped tightly in a white blanket, was cradled in Harry's arms. Meghan stood beside him, smiling. The photo was brief, awkward, and notably void of any interaction between the baby and the camera. His face was partially obscured. The lighting was dim. He didn't move. Veteran royal photographers were baffled. It was like photographing a doll. One photographer told a publication. There was no expression, no flinch from the flash, nothing. It felt unnatural. As Archie grew, or was said to be growing, the public was offered only fragments of his development. The Sussexes released images sparingly, black and white photos, shadowy side profiles, or pictures of Archie's back. Rarely did the world get a clear, full view of the child's face. And when they did, many questioned the authenticity. In December 2019, the couple shared a holiday card featuring a digitally altered image of Archie crawling toward the camera. It looked whimsical, even adorable, until experts pointed out inconsistencies in the image's lighting and texture. Graphic designers speculated that Archie's face had been superimposed from another photo. The Sussexes denied tampering, but declined to release the original image. The doubts didn't end there. In May 2020, Meghan read a children's book to Archie in a video supporting Save the Children. This was the first time the public heard the toddler's voice. Yet, something about the interaction felt rehearsed. Meghan was animated, almost exaggerated, while Archie seemed disconnected, fidgeting, looking off camera, resisting physical affection. Child development specialists later noted that the video seemed more like a performance than a candid family moment. Another photo followed months later, taken in their backyard. Harry held Archie while Meghan smiled in the background. The child's face was again barely visible. Analysts who examined the photo noted a stark contrast in skin tone between Archie's face and hands, raising the theory that the image had been digitally edited or even manipulated with a filter to obscure details. Still, the Sussexes maintained their stance. Privacy was their right. But critics questioned why privacy always seemed to involve such tightly controlled, staged moments, why the child never appeared in casual, candid footage like so many other celebrity children. Then came the Oprah interview in March 2021. Meghan and Harry spoke of their struggles, their isolation, their desire to protect Archie from racism and press intrusion. Yet when asked about Archie's life, there were inconsistencies. Meghan claimed their son loved books, birds, and dancing. But when asked why he hadn't appeared at family functions or been seen at major events, Harry pivoted. He said they were trying to raise him like a normal child. But by then, many weren't buying it. Across online forums, royal gossip columns, and YouTube analysis videos, content creators began comparing Archie's rare appearances. Some highlighted the stark differences in his facial structure, hair texture, and height between photos. In one side-by-side comparison, a child identified as Archie at 18 months looked eerily similar to another child shown at age 3. Critics speculated whether different children had been used in the images or whether the Sussexes were concealing something far more shocking. A major turning point came in December 2022, when the Netflix documentary Harry and Meghan was released. It promised unprecedented access into their private world. Yet even with hours of footage, Archie's face remained largely hidden or blurred. The series offered more photos of Harry and Meghan than of their own children. And when Archie was featured, it was in brief, backlit scenes or in footage so filtered that identification became impossible. More doubts crept in. A former employee of a high-end California photo studio alleged that Meghan had once requested a private session for family composites, asking for multiple versions of baby images to be edited together. She said the request was unusual, especially when Meghan allegedly asked for the images to reflect multiple ethnic backgrounds. But the greatest controversy erupted following Archie's 3rd birthday celebration in May 2022. Instead of releasing party photos or inviting press to document the occasion, as is customary with royal children, the Sussexes released a single, tightly cropped image. It showed Archie holding balloons in what looked like a studio setting, not their home. The child was turned away from the camera. His hair was different from previous photos. His ears didn't match earlier images. And within hours, facial recognition software run by internet sleuths suggested the child might not be the same as in earlier appearances. Then came the absence from public life altogether. For over a year following that photo, Archie was not seen in any verifiable footage. No photos. No videos. No school pickup sightings. No public outings with his parents. Meghan and Harry continued to make appearances at award shows, speaking engagements, and charity events, but Archie was gone. Not just hidden, gone. Parents at Ridgewood Hills whispered that Archie was rarely seen at drop-off. Teachers refused to comment on his behavior, citing privacy laws. And the school's newsletter, which regularly featured student artwork and event photos, never once mentioned his name. Until the incident. When Joshua Maddox claimed to be Archie's real father in front of stunned parents and staff, it wasn't just the emotional shock that reverberated. It was the memory of a child whose existence had become more theoretical than visible. And the suspicion that what the world had been shown all along might have been something curated, or even fabricated. Today, every photo, every video, every public moment involving Archie is being re-examined. Who was behind the camera? Who edited the footage? Who verified his presence at events? The answers are murky. The timeline is fractured. And the child at the center of it all remains unseen. It leaves one unavoidable question. Was Archie ever truly introduced to the world? Or have we only seen what we were meant to see, a version of a child shaped by secrets, designed for an illusion, protected not from the media, but from the truth? The storm that erupted at Ridgewood Hills Early Learning Academy didn't stay confined to one hallway or even the school's pristine Montecito campus. Within days of the Prince Harry-Meghan Markle bodyguard confrontation, the spotlight had shifted from royal scandal to institutional failure. While the world obsessed over paternity claims and Meghan's silence, a growing number of voices began asking another, more local and unsettling question. Why didn't the school act sooner? And why did they let it happen in the first place? At first glance, Ridgewood Hills was a picture of modern excellence. A top-tier learning environment with a multi-million-dollar campus, personalized education plans, emotional wellness programs, and an annual tuition fee that exceeded the median national income. The school's board was made up of powerful donors, former CEOs, and parents with political connections. It marketed itself as a sanctuary for elite children, safe, nurturing, and emotionally intelligent. But beneath that polished image was a culture of avoidance, a habit of brushing aside issues that might reflect poorly on the institution's reputation. And once the nursery incident took place, that culture was forced into the harsh light of scrutiny. Immediately following the event, the administration issued a brief statement to parents. An incident of a private and sensitive nature had occurred involving members of the Sussex family. But the matter was under review, and the school was taking steps to ensure student safety. It was a vague, carefully worded memo that avoided accountability and transparency. But for the parents who had witnessed the incident firsthand, who had seen Prince Harry physically confront Meghan and heard a man claiming to be Archie's biological father, it wasn't enough. Not even close. One parent, a former litigation attorney, was among the first to demand clarity. "I expected better," she told a local paper. This wasn't a minor disruption. This was a public outburst involving potential violence, psychological trauma, and a direct claim that could impact not only a child's identity but the safety of every student around him. And the school chose to stay quiet. That silence is complicity. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Within 48 hours, over 70% of parents signed a petition demanding an independent investigation into the school's handling of the incident. Several withdrew their children from the program altogether. 2 families filed formal complaints to the California Department of Education, citing the administration's failure to de-escalate the situation or notify authorities in real time. Had this been any other couple, one parent said, CPS would have been called. Police would have arrived. But because they're famous, the school went into crisis control instead of acting in the best interest of the children. The criticism wasn't confined to the parents. Staff inside the school began leaking internal memos that revealed the administration had been aware of increasing tension between Meghan, Harry, and their security team for months. One email from a senior teacher to the head of student wellness expressed concern over Meghan's frequent absences during school events and the child's occasional reluctance to engage with peers. Another email, dated just 3 weeks before the incident, detailed an observation from a classroom aide that Archie had become increasingly withdrawn and was exhibiting signs of emotional distress. The administration's response to both? Monitor and support is needed, but perhaps